Welcome guys, it's Ashish and in this video I'll talk about a novella called Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. In this video I'll talk about the story in detail and try to make it as fun as possible. Please do excuse me if I make any mistakes because this is indeed my first time making something like this. Here I go. Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman, wakes up one morning to find himself transformed into a gigantic insect-like creature. His new form is grotesque, with a hard shell, multiple legs, and an inability to communicate. Shocked and disoriented, Gregor worries not about his transformation, but being late for work. Now, if you try to understand what Franz Kafka is trying to write here, is Gregor Samsa is indeed shocked and disoriented, but he's not worried. He just needs to go to work. He knows something has happened to him, but he doesn't really care about that. He just wants to go to work. He's late for it. He's so late that he's just stressed. His family, his father, mother, sister, become alarmed when Gregor doesn't leave his room. But then we have a new character. Gregor's boss, the office manager, visits Samsa's home to inquire about his absence. When Gregor tries to speak and explain, his voice becomes unintelligible. He eventually forces himself out of his room, startling everyone. The office manager flees in fear, while Gregor's father drives him back into his room with a cane and injuring him in the process. Now, this is indeed a very mixed, summary. And of course, this summary is by ChatGPT, but I'll try to explain you. Now, what the author is trying to say here is that he could not speak. He could only see. And Gregor sees his boss getting angry and everyone getting scared of him. The only person who he was scared of, the office manager, flees in fear. But his own father drives him back into his room with a cane, injuring him in the process. You can see how Gregor writes this part, or like Franz Kafka writes this part, because it shows that he had an actual problem with his family. He could see the dad of Gregor as a person who was unsure of what happened to his son. And it's kind of sad, because if you just one day woke up as someone else, it's a very real fact that your parents or whoever will start disliking you, will have something against you. It's very common, and I think in most of Franz Kafka's book, you will see these kind of underlying tones which have a dark theme behind them. And if you read about Franz Kafka's life, you will understand why he wrote these things. Now, life as an insect. Over time, Gregor adjusts to his new form. Grete, his sister, initially takes on the responsibility of feeding him and cleaning his room, showing care and sympathy. However, Gregor's inability to work leaves the family in financial hardship. Now, before this, Gregor's father did not have a job, and Gregor Samsa had to work for his family. He was the sole breadwinner of his whole family. But despite that, he one day turned out to be that, and he could not go to work. He basically made the family go into a state which none of us want that to happen to our family. His father, who had been idle, finds work as a bank attendant. His mother takes on a sewing, and Grete gets a job as a sales girl. Now, Gregor wanted to send his sister to a music school, as her sister was actually good in violin. And, he, as an insect, sees his whole family get into stuff that he wouldn't really like. Like, the only reason Gregor was working was so his family could live a decent living. But now that he has been turned into an insect, he finds himself in a very peculiar state, looking at his family working all the time. Their dreams are crushed because of him. But as we go on, as Gregor becomes increasingly isolated, his physical condition deteriorates. He hides under furniture to avoid upsetting his family, who are repulsed by his appearance. Grete grows more distant and impatient, and her initial compassion fades. The family begins to neglect Gregor, leaving his room cluttered and dirty. So, as you read that, you try to understand the once nice sister that he had finally turns into a character that, if you're reading the novella, you will understand the frustration, but she becomes a character that is against Gregor Samsa's transformation. She gets burdened by it. Now, they are still very poor. They are still financially incapable of doing things to take care of Gregor. Now, to make ends meet, the Samsas take in 3 lodgers. These men are critical and demanding, representing societal judgment and pressure of appearance. Now, of course, this summary is made by ChatGPT, so you will see kind of a mixed story, but these lodgers were kind of the villain of the story. I mean, they were kind of essential at the same part, but they were the villain. One evening, Grady plays violin for them. Gregor dawns by the music, ventures out of his room. The lodgers see him and are horrified, refusing to pay. Enraged, Gregor's father chases him back into his room, where he is severely injured. Grady finally declares that they must get rid of Gregor, claiming he's no longer her brother. The family agrees, seeing him as an obstacle to their future happiness. Heartbroken and exhausted, Gregor retreats to his room and dies quietly overnight. The cleaning woman discovers her lifeless body, informs the family. The Samsas feel a sense of relief than grief. They dismiss the lodgers and decide to move into a smaller, more affordable apartment. The novella ends with the family riding a tram into the countryside, discussing their future plans for a brighter future. Grete, who has fully matured into a young woman, symbolizes the family's hope for renewal. Now, I must say a few things before I kind of talk about this whole novella, and also talk about what exactly happens in the last 2 paragraphs that I just read. Gregor seems to be heartbroken and exhausted, but he was also severely injured by his parents. It symbolizes that if you're not capable enough of living in this world, you will face troubles that will break you. And knowing Franz Kafka, he writes the death of Gregor Samsa as a beautiful masterpiece. Gregor retreats into his room and dies quietly overnight. A death so quiet, but there is no grief in the family. So this whole story is confusing to a lot of people, but it is also a sense of peace to people. Just because he couldn't conform to society, he couldn't live as an insect, which really talks about, the existentialism and dehumanization, alienation, family dynamics. It's a wonderful story if you understand the themes behind it. The first time I read Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, I was confused. I was so confused. I didn't know what to say, what to think. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's me, Tangi, aka Ashish, and I hope to see you guys sometime later.